Hello and welcome to Diaspora Digital Media. My name is Rampam Jr. For over the years and decades, actually, Africa has been losing some of its best brains to the international community and not slave trade, of course, voluntarily. Maybe something has been wrong with our continent in terms of leadership, or maybe we just want to explore and see more of the world. But for most Nigerians who find themselves abroad, voluntarily, it's either for education or for better opportunities, where that is lacking in Nigeria and most African countries at that. We're starting today a series on the Diaspora Experience. My guest for this very first edition is no other than Mazi HTM Okoye in London. Mazi, you're welcome to DDM.
Thank you. Thank you, Prince Rampam. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I like the background there. You look all dressed up. How's the weather?
Well, we know we're still very much in the winter, so that's why I'm dressed like this, because the weather is still cold. I think it's probably about 3 to about 4 degrees this morning, whilst last night was about -1, -2. So still pretty much cold. So we're really looking forward to the spring now. So yeah, 5 months of winter hopefully is behind us.
That is great. Well, right here in Nigeria, it's the dust, the Hamilton dust. In fact, you have to be going out with your nose mask or face mask as you go. It's so cloudy out, visibility is shortened, and there's a lot of cough, catarrh because of the dust. So sometimes we feel as if maybe we should swap positions, or you come back and we go there. Right? Yeah, it feels like.
Yeah, I think
Well,
we need the warmth here without the dust. Um,
uh,
and nobody likes the dust, but yeah, we need the warmth definitely.
yes, but definitely that's not why you left Nigeria for the UK. Can you tell us more about Mazi Okoye? Let's get to
Yes,
know you.
um, I mean, my own journey started 1996, and that's where my journey started. After just finishing secondary school, the dissatisfaction that we are feeling today, or everyone is feeling in Nigeria today, actually didn't start today. Immediately, sort of after finishing secondary school, me and my sort of classmates at the time actually has already, made up our minds that Nigeria is not a place that offers prospects in terms of, any kind of growth for any sort of individual. So, right about that time, we've already started planning how to, japa as we know it today, how to, leave the country as we know it today. So, my journey started 1996, where finishing secondary school. Believe me, dollar to naira parity at the time was, I think, 23 naira to $1 at the time. Compare it to
Mm,
now,
ah,
then you do the math. So, yeah, that started 1996, and then I left Nigeria after gathering some money from parents and relations, and then arriving in Lagos, and then at the time even getting visa to a Western country was quite difficult. It's difficult to get visa straight from Nigeria to London per se, or the US per se. So I have to travel to some African countries. I went to Cameroon. I didn't drive. I didn't go by transportation. I didn't go by road. I flew to
Cameroon.
Cameroon. From Cameroon, I flew to Zimbabwe. From Zimbabwe, I flew to Mozambique, and then from Mozambique, I used the road to cross over to Swaziland. Then from Swaziland, uses the road also to cross over to South Africa. So yeah,
Okay,
go
yes,
on, Pam.
yes, Mazi. Yes. What really, I mean, when you were going through all these countries, was it like before moving to the next one, like from Cameroon? How many days did you spend and then move to the next country?
To the next one, I didn't spend much time really. I was just really on transit. I was just on transit from in Cameroon. I didn't spend much time. I just, changing planes from my plane from, I believe I used, I think South African airline at the time, and then just changing planes from that plane to the another plane to goes to Zimbabwe. So it wasn't a long stay. It's only in Mozambique that I spent probably about 2 weeks before I then journeyed forward to Swaziland. Um, then from Swaziland, I stayed probably about 2 months in Swaziland. There's not much happening in Swaziland, and then we crossed over to South Africa.
This is interesting. So I'm curious, within the movement between Nigeria, Cameroon, down Mozambique, South Africa, you have seen a lot of airports on the way. And how would you assess at that time the standards of the African immigration system? How smooth was it? How receptive were they to you as a Nigerian?
Well, that is an interesting question actually, because at the time, say for example, now if you're a traveler, a frequent traveler, you notice that you cannot smoke in the aeroplanes, for example. But at the time, everybody smokes in the so long as you smoke, you can still smoke in the aeroplane. But with regards to immigration, Nigeria is still very much the same way, where people sort of haggles you for money. The immigration people were haggles you for money, and but after sort of you leave Nigeria, you don't get so much of that sort of haggling with regards to people asking you for money. In Cameroon, there's not much with regards to immigration. However, I encountered a little bit of an issue whilst in Zimbabwe. Whilst we landed in Zimbabwe and waiting for a connecting flight to Mozambique, I encountered an issue. This sort of immigration guy, I suppose Zimbabwe was relatively a very wealthy country at the time. I can tell you, at the time, flying into Zimbabwe, I mean, most of the passengers in the plane were all white people from Britain. I
Hmm.
don't know so much about now that everything has, gone to the dogs. But at the time, you know, the plane after plane that is coming into Zimbabwe at the time were all, white Caucasian people coming into Zimbabwe. So it's only there in Zimbabwe that I encountered a little bit of an issue whereby an immigration officer, although my documentation were all legitimate, however, he has it, he was trying to pick on my documentation as if I didn't obtain it in a legitimate way. However, eventually, when a white guy took over the shift, everything was fine again. So, apart from that issue, I didn't have much issue with regards to immigration. Another place I encountered an issue, I suppose, is sort of routine thing, especially in that part of the world where you have a lot of um, drug trafficking passing through that route at the time.
Hmm.
Another place I
Yeah.
encountered a little bit on issue is in Mozambique, where we got, have an excessive scrutiny with regards to the immigration. But apart from that, it wasn't too bad an experience in terms of actually going through immigration and continue my onward journey.
Wow. So yes, now you are in South Africa. That's where you stopped earlier. How was South Africa, and how long were you in South Africa? Because 1996, I think just a few years before that, Mandela had his liberation, and Nigeria played a pivotal role. You know, we're always on the air, sending poems, writing songs. And how did you find South Africans? And then, how was their reception with you being a Nigerian?
Yes, yes. I must say that I believe it's in 1994 that Mandela got released, if I'm not mistaken, 1994. So South Africans, especially the black South Africans, were still, coming out from that sort of era of apartheid. So
Mhm.
arriving in South Africa was quite weird in some sense because you still see the military tanks still parading the streets.
Wow.
And at the time, you find that there is still, especially where I was staying in Hebrew, stroke Berea in South Africa, where you have concentration of Nigerians at the time. You have, still, military tanks, still going through the streets, try to, I don't know whether they're expecting riots or whatever, but, they still parade the street at the time because South Africa was still very much in a turmoil, after that apartheid era. And that time you find a lot of African people still coming into town, still coming into because they were all relegated into townships during that apartheid era. They were all in townships like Soweto, like Alexandria, and just in the townships. So at that time, they were still very much coming into towns like Berea, Hebrew, and Yeovil. So we are quite accepted with regards to the general setup. However, with regards to every other thing that was going on politically at the time, Nigerians, I suppose we are not that many at the time. We're not many Nigerians at the time that reside there in South Africa. So
Okay.
not like now where you have all this, everyone is going to South Africa. By the time there's not many of us, so we are quite accepted. We are, dotted around and, everybody, doing their own thing. But the reception wasn't as hostile like we see it in recent years where they're having like, you know, um, protests against foreigners and all that. So the reception at the time was pretty much, acceptable. We get on with them. You can imagine at the time, actually, I can walk out in the street as dangerous as it is at the time. I wasn't, feeling like I'm in danger because at the time you have a lot of street boys, people that still come out from the township into the town. They sleep on the street. They just drink and smoke glue. All these young people, which I took so much pity on. And then I wasn't attacked. I never felt like I'm in danger of being hurt or anything. So the reception by the black South Africans wasn't as hostile as it is compared to today. Um, Due to obvious reasons that there's so many people there now, the economic downturn of South Africa also, and the black South Africans are also sort of, you know, you know, fighting for their own rights. Mind you,
Mhm.
it's almost now I don't know about 20 something years, so time has moved on. Yeah, so reception then was much better than it is today.
That's excellent. Now, when you set out from Nigeria, where was your destination of choice? Or did you like plan to have this glorious adventure you are enumerating, or is it by circumstance?
Yeah, my destination was actually South Africa because before I left, I already had a few friends of mine that have already left to go to South Africa. They are staying in South Africa at the time. I think two of them actually, and one of them I actually met in Swaziland. He's still actually living in South Africa. He's settled down there. He has family there now. South Africa was destination of choice because we had a friend of mine who has a stepsister that is from Swaziland. that is where we get our sort of visas from, because our visas are Swaziland visa, which you can use to go into South Africa and stuff. So yeah, my destination of choice was South Africa.
Hmm. Wow, interesting. Now you are in South Africa. At the point you landed after staying for a while, is there at any point you felt like this is too much? Let me just go back to Nigeria, like regretted leaving?
Definitely. I mean, arriving in a place where, although you know someone, however, that person hasn't, you know, catered for themselves. Nonetheless, catering for someone that just arrived. So it's quite a very difficult beginning, I must say, because we find it very difficult because there's no job. There is you know so much you can do as someone that just came, and it was difficult, to eat. However, I was quite very lucky that as luck might have it, there is someone which I knew, or I didn't know him, which knew my dad in Nigeria, and for some reason, I bumped into this lady. Although I didn't know him that well, she's selling food in like a restaurant there in Berea, where we all sort of stayed. And then we started talking. And then it happens, as luck might have it, it happens that she actually knew my my parents. And
Hmm.
then from there, after talking for a while, and then I actually solved the problem of food, because that's the most important thing first. So I can eat in the restaurant. And then from there, she introduced me to the husband, which he also knew my parents. So they eventually took me in, and then I started staying with them. And then that was the rest was simply, try to find my feet and, try to start a business, and then go from there.
Obviously, from the description, you didn't quite go with a load of cash to like set up yourself,
No.
and mhm, that is interesting. So now you are in South Africa and you're beginning to do something. Please carry on from there. Let's see how you got to where you are now.
Okay. Whilst in South Africa, I after settled with regards to food, accommodation, but you know that these things are more or less temporary. Everyone is still looking after themselves. They can't sort of take you on and then carry you along as if you're a child, or yeah, as a relation. You still have to look out for yourself. Eventually, that sister that I just spoke about that sells restaurant there eventually left South Africa to travel to Canada, and then from there I moved in with the husband. We stayed together for a while, and then things wasn't working out very well. And there's a friend, um, his name is, or his guy name at the time was Osomoko, who wanted to start a business. I suggested we start like business center at the time. He has a little bit of money because he's been in South Africa for some time. So he has a little bit of money, and he's looking for a place to invest, business to invest the money on. So I suggested we start a business center, and then we started a business center at the time, which I was managing at the time. And then I was getting some money from there. And then after that business center, from there, things sort of picked up a little bit, where I can start getting some revenue and some money coming in. And then from there we extended to Durban. We extended the business to Durban, from Johannesburg to Durban. So I moved to Durban. From Durban, I met also some few contacts where I can supply mobile phones and what have you with regards to telecommunications. So from there I made some money, and that is where I met my now ex-wife, and she happens to be British. And after a while dating, we decided to get married. We got married in Durban, and after getting married, we thought, okay, we're still young. What should we do? Let's travel. And okay, we suggested maybe going to the United Kingdom, since that's more or less where we can easily, travel to, because she's from there. It will be easy for me to obtain visa to travel. So yeah, that's how I finally came to United Kingdom, um, through spouse visa with my ex-wife, and then at the time we were here, or the time or before we traveled to the United Kingdom here, she was pregnant, and when whilst we are here, she become slightly ill, and eventually she gave birth, and our first child, Giano, was born with some complications, which means that we cannot really travel back to South Africa. And then we ended up staying because we are advised not to take him to South Africa just immediately after birth, because they have to look after him medically, and then even taking him back to South Africa will be costing a lot of money because of the surgeries that he has to be going through. So we ended up more or less staying the first year, the second year. You can't just be staying without doing something, because nobody's giving you anything. So from there, I started work. I started first, packing, chicken. That's my first job in this country, packing chicken. And then I started to look, for something more, lucrative and something more fulfilling that I can do. And then I got a job down south here, because at the time we were staying in Manchester, or a place called Buxton. Um, so I got a job down south here as a security officer, working in a shop, trying to stop shoplifters. So I did that for a while, and then that wasn't really what I wanted to do, because I'm quite ambitious, and as an ambitious person, you want to push yourself more. So yeah, that's
Yeah,
me.
man. Yeah.
Go,
Just
go
a
on.
minute. It's interesting. You have now moved and transitioned from a secondary school graduate into a full-grown man with a family,
Yeah,
and you don't have really what to do,
yeah,
and attributing most of the let me use the word success, or your safety nets in South Africa, to the presence of other Nigerians who were hospitable and were willing to see you through. Now, just before we hit the London Manchester axis, what would have been your situation if other Nigerians were not there to receive you like they did in South Africa?
no, it would have been most difficult, but in this case, there's something, there's this saying that goes that fortune assists the brave, but the idle are the indolent. Knowledge never comes. I always sort of have sort of intuitive, sort of I don't know what to call it, sense of
Follow
what is
your
going to, yeah, something that is going to happen. I never really thought about so much about the dangers of what is in front of me. I just wanted to, you know,
keep
explore, or just sort of, deal with whatever that comes along. But along the way, I always find somebody that journeys along, along with me, to give me
mm,
that extra sort of cushion, that extra sort of foundation. Even when we arrived here in the UK, we didn't know much, anybody. When I arrived here with my wife and everything, we didn't know anyone. It's only the
mm,
money that I came with from South Africa that we are using. However, when my first son was in the hospital, we actually found someone who is a Nigerian. He's a nurse in that hospital, or she's a nurse, and the husband
mm,
also worked in that hospital, who saw my last name Okoye, and figured that we are sort of as an Igbo person, and
yeah.
that's, I'm from Nigeria. And from there, he started helping us, because
Mm,
at the time I couldn't actually do it myself, because eventually, although this is a long story, Jana
yeah.
was eventually transferred to a different hospital, which is a bit further away from where we live. And,
Yeah.
I have to journey to work, and then to the hospital, journey to work. But they are there, these two couple were there, helping my ex-wife now, to be able to look after Giano. So I always
Mm.
find that help along the way, in all this, my travel, in all this experience.
For a married man with responsibilities, now wife needing surgery, and you have to go to start tagging chickens to earn a living. How did you feel at that point?
Well, I didn't have any choice. You see, at the time, you don't really consider the I suppose you don't really consider the prestige of what you're doing, because at the time, coming into the country, you're not entitled to any sort of benefits. For example,
Yeah.
like the indigents, you're not entitled to benefit. So even before you came, you've already signed that you're not going to have any recourse to the public funds. So that is
Mm.
out of the question. So you have to, carry your own load, carry your own cross. So I don't have any choice but to do that at the time. I know that it is temporary. I'm not going to pack chicken for the rest of my life. However, at that time, at that few months arriving, I have to do something, and that packing chicken is the only thing that within that vicinity where we stayed in Buxton that I can do. So it's actually it's actually a godsend for me and for my family at the time. So yeah, no matter looking back at it now, you were thinking, oh wow, did I really pack chicken? But to me at the time, it was a godsend. It was marvelous. Yeah.
Mm. My goodness. So this is interesting. And just before we wrapped up, since we have arrived at Manchester and you're now in the UK, looking back and the condition of Nigeria today, were you happy you left?
Um, Actually, I was thinking. Actually, most of us that left then feels like as we have premonition, how the country is going to turn out. Because at the time, we're still hearing this promise that things are going to get better, things are going to get better. Even the mindset for me, as we were living, as I was living at the time, was, somehow, you know, for some reason, that someone is going to make that change in Nigeria. That before we all come back again in a few years' time, everything would have been, you know, Nigeria would have been like, London or, New York or something like that. However, after coming back, every time I get back to Nigeria, you find that things actually got worse than what it was when we left. So, in actual sense, I think is a, actually we saw the future. Some of us that left then, we saw the future, how the country is going to be, and left the time we left. Because now I don't believe we could have done it the way we did it at the time. Because at the time there's not much people. The world is not as filled up as it is today. There's no terrorism at the time. There's not much talk of terrorism at the time. There's not much talk of COVID pandemic. There's not much talk of recession. So the world was relatively stable at the time. You can actually travel freely at the time, but not today. Not today. Today it has gone from bad to worse, which makes it even more difficult for our people to even japa, for example. Yeah.
How is the racial balance there in the UK? Are there difficulties facing primarily because you are in a diaspora from an African country?
Well, there's always going to be. There's always going to be. However, it depends on the kind of person you are. Certain things you can sort of ignore, and with regards to how excuse me, regards to how people see you. But there's always got to be that racial imbalance with regards to indigenous people here in the UK. So you always find that people are gonna excuse me, look at you in a certain way. However, it depends on the kind of person you are. For me, from my own experience, I don't regard those things. That I never really felt that I don't belong here. I'm free to go anywhere that I wanted to go. I've traveled the length and breadth of this country. I've been to so many places, in this country. So I never felt like I wasn't accepted, probably because of the way I look at myself, the way I've traveled from my experience and all that. But there's always going to be that racial imbalance, and where some people will look at you and try to treat you in a certain way because you're not from here. But from the individual's perspective, I don't care so much. Where it becomes a problem is where it goes into institutions like the police, like like the judicial system and all that. So that is where you find, more trouble with regards to racial imbalance. Once you get to the institutionalized way of, looking at people from other ethnic groups, especially black people. So that's where you find that, there is a lot of trouble within the institutions, the way they treat other ethnic groups. That's the way I can put it. Yeah.
You've been in the UK for some time now, and you have met probably bad and good Nigerians. What is your general assessment of how people see Nigerians? You are a Nigerian. Are they geniuses or fraudsters?
No, I wouldn't say that they see us as fraudsters. One thing you have to know about this. The psychology of white people. White people don't actually, although so in the news, is always projected as if white people are are monolithic in terms of the way they see things. It's not like that. A white person will look at you as an individual. When they see you, they speak to an individual. They know you as an individual. They look at your responsibility. They look at your character as a person rather than as a group of people. So I don't think
Okay.
Nigerians are looked at as fraudsters in this country. No, they don't look at it. Forget about what you hear in the news. They don't look at us as fraudsters. It's not like that. No, they look at you as an individual. Whatever you do is you as an individual that did it, not the group that you come from. Because then themselves also commit crime, and you see that daily on the news. So I don't think it's like that. The way the news try to portray it.
Mm. Wow, thank you very much, Mazi Okoye, for that journey. Yes, and we have arrived in UK. And we will continue this discussion because there's a lot that we need to learn. And by way of wrapping up, do you have any advice for Nigerians, Africans generally, who are thinking of jackpine?
Well, my advice is nowadays it's not like it used to be where you can just jump on the plane and just keep traveling like I did, because at those days although things were, we see things as bad in Nigeria at the time, but actually looking back, we see those days as good old days actually. So
Mm,
in terms of advice, now you have to plan very, very well with regards to where you're going, because the roads are very, very precarious, especially for those that you see our people now taking some extreme measures in terms of traveling through the desert, traveling through the Mediterranean, where people get drowned all the time. So my advice is, if you really want to travel, you have to really plan, where you're going, what you're going there to do, because at the time there's still relatively, you know, less people. You can easily get a job, be it packing chicken, but now it's actually more difficult to get even that sort of menial job, because the government is, tightening up because of population growth. Everything is, it's becoming more difficult. But at the time, you can easily pick up, security job. Now, it's not that easy to pick up a security job, because you have to go through training, you have to go through a lot of things. So it's about planning and knowing what you're going there to do. You have to make plans for, how you're going to sustain yourself, because you cannot rely on the public funds. You cannot rely on the government to look after you. So you have to plan for your stay. You have to plan for your health. So these things requires a lot of planning. It requires a lot of money. The time we traveled, I didn't have much money when I was traveling. As I was traveling, that's how I was making money. But at this day and age, it's not like that. Even in Cameroon now, there's been war. Zimbabwe has gone down the drain. Even Mozambique, even at the time, was so difficult. But at the time, you can still get people to help you. South Africa now has become, a no man's land for Nigerians. So you find that everything has gone downwards. So my advice, if anybody wants to travel, let them plan well, let them plan, for every eventuality, which is not cheap to travel. And because if you consider, the amount of money it takes now to travel, you have to think twice, you know, whether all that money is spent and the risk associated with it, whether it is really worth it, leaving Nigeria to go and still, suffer, especially as middle-aged person. As a young person, you can, travel, and like I did, because I left Nigeria very, very young when I was, just after secondary school. So I can do that at the time. But for, for somebody in the middle age that has a family in Nigeria, that has, other commitments, you got to really, really, think seriously what you're going to do and why you're traveling, whether that is the best option for you, because it's not easy out here anymore. It's very, very, very difficult out here anymore. Both getting jobs, both looking after yourself, and but getting your papers right if you're planning to stay long term. So a lot of things to consider if you wanted to leave Nigeria, now coming to any sort of Western country. I don't know about Asian country. I don't know about other African country, but I can imagine it should be still the same sort of you know
Mm.
planning very well.
Well, we are in a very tight corner. Do you want to come back home with your family? And if yes, what is stopping you? What will make you come back home with your entire family?
Believe me, I always wanted to come back home, because after all my travels, because South Africa and all the African countries I've been to, it's not the only place I've been to in this world. I've been to so many countries. As you know, I've been to so many countries. I've traveled the length and breadth of the United States. I've traveled the length and breadth of Russia. I've traveled the length and breadth of Europe. I've been to Asia countries and all that. However, after all this travel, you always felt that where your heart is home. You always feel like there'll come a time you want to come home and settle down and establish something, with all the experience that you've gathered over the years, to be able to invest it in somebody somewhere, somewhere that you know that gives you prospect in terms of moving forward, to fix our own place to be like where you are, where you have been. um what is stopping me is the whole sort of government system in Nigeria, where people are not doing what they're supposed to do in terms of our leadership. Our leadership has been, really nothing to write home about. They keep on messing the country about. You know, there's a lot of insecurity. There's a lot of all this, economic problems where you know, if you want to bring back money to Nigeria and establish a business, one day the inflation is, here, the next minute is over there. So it's a bit of up in the air with regards to us that wanted to come back home, because we always think, okay, coming back home, how are we gonna, where should we invest and make sure that that investment stays, that investment lasts, that investment pay for itself. So that is the conundrum that we find ourselves in. That is what actually is stopping a lot of people that's been away from Nigeria for a long time from coming home, because there's nothing for them to, something, there is nothing, that gives them that confidence that Nigeria will be is sustainable. There's nothing to give them that confidence Nigeria is sustainable. That sustainability is not there in Nigeria at the moment. And that's what we are looking for, to have that sort of system, that sort of setup that gives us confidence in sustainability in terms of, you know, you know, life and economic and every other thing that goes with existence, which we don't have in Nigeria now.
Wow. It is rather on this note that I think would draw the curtains on this very edition of Starting the Journey. It is the Diaspora Experience. Mazi HCM Mukoye, thank you so much for making time from your tight schedule I hope they have not removed your card, or you need to go and punch back in and continue your work. But thank you for giving us this time to share your experience, sir.
Thank you, Pam. My pleasure. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that has been our special guest, Mazi H.M. Okoye from the UK. And has been our guest on this first series of Diaspora Experience. Must have gathered through the discourse. Yes, things are better done abroad, but who would make Nigeria's things better? We have had issue with leadership, and we all know that. So while you're thinking of going out of the country to make a living, you need to plan it well, and you need to be a good ambassador, so you don't run into the wrong crowd or end up with bad agents and they sell you somewhere as a slave or anything, or ritualists or organ harvesters and stuff. He is lucky through the drought. I mean, through the journeys he went through Cameroon, Mozambique, South Africa. He met good people. We may not have all those good people waiting for you. Is that not to tell you that you cannot try, but have an ambition, have a plan, and also pray for Nigeria. If you are back home, do your best to make Nigeria what it should be. With that, thank you very much, Ernest, for being back there. And special thanks to our guest, Mazi H.M. Okoye. I remain Rampam Jr. on Diaspora Digital Media saying, thanks for watching. See you next time.